من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. The topic today is keeping the heart alive. But before we try to do something or work hard to do something, we have to understand why it's important. And when we talk about the heart, we have to understand why it is that the heart is so important. One of the reasons why the heart is so important, we hear and we're taught from an ayah in the Quran on the words of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, in this section of the Quran, he has a long dua that he's calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the things that Ibrahim alayhi salam says is he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to disgrace him on the Day of Judgment. And when he goes on to describe the Day of Judgment, he says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. The day when nothing is going to benefit you from money or wealth or children. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Except for the one who comes to Allah with a heart that is salim, with a heart that is sound, that is healthy. So today I'm going to talk about poverty, actually. But the type of poverty that I'm going to talk about is not the apparent kind of poverty. Because before you can talk about any type of concept, you need definitions. You need a criterion. In speaking about poverty, we need to understand that there's external poverty and there's internal poverty. And one of them is far more dangerous than the other. Because while one form of poverty determines how we live temporarily, the other form determines how we live eternally. Today I'm going to speak about the latter type of poverty. Internal poverty is the poverty of the soul. It's described as the unmoved soul. It's the soul that's been created but hasn't really realized the reason why it has been created. It's the soul that lives a purposeless life. It's the heart that beats but has already died. Because while the body can cry or bleed and feel the pain of this material world, the soul is untouched by these things. See, there's only one thing that can cut or stab or impoverish the soul. There's only one thing that can kill it, and that is to deprive it of its one true need, to be close to its originator, to be near God. Spiritual deprivation is the true impoverishment. True poverty is standing poor on the Day of Judgment. As the Prophet ﷺ told us, and yet despite this reality, we continue to live our lives, feeding our bodies, but starving our hearts and our souls. The sad irony of this focus is that our body that we tend to is temporary, while the soul and the heart that we neglect is eternal. When a body dies, we cry. But the death of the body isn't the true death. It's only the removing of a shell, and then the movement from one realm to another truer realm. We weep for departing bodies, but our hearts remain unmoved by those bodies that are still alive, but whose hearts and souls have already died because of their alienation and distance from that which gives life, God. What impoverishes and kills the heart? It is allowing the heart to know, it is allowing the heart to love anything as it should only love God. See, the heart was created with a very particular purpose and in a very particular way. when you fail to use anything for the purpose for which it was created, then that thing breaks, it drowns, it starves, it dies. The heart was created for God and by God. The heart was created to know and love God. The heart was created to be given to God, to be filled with God. The heart that is given to or filled by any other thing suffers the most painful impoverishment and death. The human heart is like a boat in the ocean of this life. The boat that allows the ocean water to enter breaks and then drowns. The human heart that allows this dunya to enter breaks and then drowns. And then it becomes owned. Owned by this life. Owned by our gadgets, our Facebook, our jobs, the distractions, the fashion trends, the marketing tools, the money, the power, the status. The heart that is owned by this life is a prisoner of the worst kind. The heart that is owned by any other master, other than the master of masters, is the weakest of all slaves. That is true impoverishment. That is true oppression. That is true death. As human beings, we enslave ourselves to a lot of things. Some of us in here are enslaved to money. Some of us have enslaved our hearts to other people. We love them as we should only love Allah. Some of us are enslaved to status or to our careers. I tell you to ask yourself, what do you love most? Many of us in this room, in fact everyone in this room, will probably say that we love God and His Messenger most. We say this with our tongues, we say this in our minds, but our hearts, our actions say otherwise. How do you know? Ask yourself, what is your refuge? When you're most broken, where do you go? When you're afraid, where do you hide? When you need, who do you ask? What do you fear most? What do you stay up at night worrying about? Who, what makes you cry most? What do you think about most? What occupies your mind in your prayers? Is it really God? Is it really Allah on our minds most? Is it really your fear of standing before Him that makes you cry in your bed? No, probably not. It's probably the person who left you, the money you lost, the job you couldn't have, the raise you couldn't get, or the career that didn't work out. What are you afraid of most? Just the thought of losing what thing causes you so much anxiety that you actually feel it physically. Is it your husband, your wife, your money, your job? Is it your image? Is it your figure? What is it? When you're given a choice, what do? When Allah says to dress and act a certain way, and then society says the opposite, which do you choose? Who defines beauty for you? Who defines success? When Allah says that interest or riba is haram, but your financial ambitions command otherwise, when society's standard for the size of your house or the brand of your car command otherwise, which do you choose? Who defines richness? Who defines poverty? What type of poverty are you most afraid of? The truth is that we choose what we love most. When we love money most, that's what we choose. When we love people most, they fill our hearts and we think of them most. Our life loses center. We leave the orbit of the Creator and we enter the orbit of the creation, a painful and unstable orbit. In the orbit of the creation, we rise and fall with the wave of the creation, the wave of praise and criticism. We rise and fall with the wave of the creation and their definitions. Our standards for success and failure come from the creation, from society. The standard for richness, the standard for poverty, comes from the creation, from society. But I think that in teaching Islam, there is a point where we went wrong. I think somewhere along the line, we turned Islam into a list of do's and don'ts, harams and halals. We teach our children about hellfire before they can even pronounce Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the most gracious. Sunday school becomes a place where they teach you all the things that are haram to do, and then all the punishments that you will be given if you do them. As soon as a person converts, the first thing they're told is now they need to change their name and stop celebrating Valentine's Day. Somewhere along the line, I think we started going about Islam from the outside in instead of from the inside out. But we need to ask ourselves, how did the prophets do it? Peace be upon them all. One of the companions relates that Aisha radiallahu anha said that if the first thing to be revealed was, do not drink alcoholic drinks, people would have said, we will never give up alcoholic drinks.